The federal government is moving to make it law that men and women get equal pay for work of equal value, at least for workers in the federal public sector. This week it tabled pay equity legislation, something that has been a long time coming in this country. Pay equity has actually been a human right since 1977, protected under the Canadian Human Rights Act. That means the Human Rights Commission hears pay equity complaints, investigates, and attempts to resolve them. But that approach hasn't really worked. In 2004, an independent pay equity task force found that it was an inadequate foundation for significant and systematic progress, and recommended making pay equity law. 14 years later, and the federal government is now heeding that call, tabling a new Pay Equity Act. It will apply to about 1.2 million people working in federal government and in federally regulated sectors. Even when it's passed, though, it won't take immediate effect. Employers with at least 10 employees have 3 years to comply, so 2021 is the earliest start date. So why did it take so long to get this going, and why will federal workers have to wait at least another 3 years for pay equity rules? Joining me now is the Minister of Labour, Patty Hajdu. Hi, Minister Hajdu. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Vashi.
Thanks for coming in. Let me start right there. Why is this another 3 years?
Well, first of all, you point out that it's been 14 years in the coming, and so we're really proud to be a government that's taking it seriously. We wanted to make sure that when we were approaching how to do pay equity, that we took into account all of the work that's happened in 2 provinces that have proactive pay equity legislation, Ontario, Quebec, but that we also spoke to employers, and that we spoke to labour organizations, that we spoke to Canadians, to people in federally regulated workplaces, and consulted with experts who are doing the complex work of pay equity to make sure that we got the approach right. And so after that deliberation, and also feedback from the special committee on pay equity that was held in the House of Commons, I think that we've landed at a good approach.
When you talk about getting feedback from employers, from Canadians, was the feedback that they don't want it? And is that why it's going to take 3 years? Or were they receptive to it? Because the insinuation from the opposition or from critics is that you kind of folded to that pressure, and that's why it takes so long.
Absolutely not. No, and I'm very fortunate to have been one of those rare people in the country who's actually had to conduct pay equity in a previous organization that I ran. So that gave me some insight into the struggles and challenges of going through the process, especially for large organizations, but for organizations of every size. Because ultimately, this isn't about a man and a woman in exactly the same job getting equal pay. Actually, most of the time that might happen. It's actually looking at classifications of jobs and determining the criteria of that job and whether or not that job has the same functioning, the same responsibilities, the same history of whether men or women traditionally fill those roles. And so that process can be time consuming, and we wanted to make sure that employers and employee groups had the skills and the tools needed to do a good job, a proper job, and not feel that they were rushed to conclusion.
Do you understand, I guess, though, the concern from, I remember interviewing you as a reporter on the Hill, I think 2 years ago, and you were saying, legislation isn't the silver bullet, we've got to think it over. But the recommendation was already coming then from, I think it was the Status of Women Committee. I remember the NDP talking very forcefully about it. So that's 2 years ago, and then we've got another 3. Is it another 5 years before a woman working in a federally controlled sector or business or organization will actually receive equal pay? Like, is it a full 5 years that they had to wait?
What will happen is that it will give, as I said, time for the groups that will be doing this work the time to have the right tools, the right approach. You know, this is legislation that's going to look differently in every workplace. You mentioned the public service, but there's also multiple federally regulated private sector employers in a variety of different industries and a variety of different sizes. And we wanted to make sure that as those groups work together, workplace committees in some cases, employers in other cases, depending on the size of their organization, that they were going to have the time to be able to assess these jobs in the right way so that we get to the point where people agree within a workplace that the compensation has been arrived at in a fair way.
Is there any evidence that if men and women are paid equally in federally regulated sectors, that trickles down to the rest of society?
Well, certainly I think we have an opportunity to show leadership at the federal level. As you know, Quebec and Ontario both have proactive pay equity legislation. I think it's important for us at the federal level to show leadership as well and say that this is a fundamental human right. We've established that. It's something that we can demonstrate that federally regulated employers can do. And I think it's one piece of closing the gender wage gap, which, as you know, is still a significant gap. And finally, if I can just add, there's one other benefit, and that's that the economy benefits. I mean, if women were fully engaged in the workforce and paid equitably, the estimated value would be $150 billion by, so it's a significant impact on our economy as well.
Is there more that your government could be doing, though, to help out or to strive for that goal outside of federally regulated sectors? And I ask because what about women who are at a disadvantage because of childcare? I mean, the NDP and other members of the opposition have been particularly critical of your government in not making daycare more affordable or not pursuing any form of universal daycare. Could you be doing more?
Well, I think there's always more to do. And, I'll always be a person that pushes us to do more. But I'm particularly proud of the fact that we had the first budget in the history of this country that had gender mainstream through every aspect of it. Things like the 5-week use it or lose it parental benefit that encourages men to take more time with their child, that alleviates some of that unpaid care work that women traditionally pick up. And the research shows that once the man starts doing the laundry, he actually does it more frequently.
But I think also the criticism was there that it only advantages people who are better off again.
The Canada Child Benefit, which many single mothers have been able to utilize, and in fact, we were so happy that the provinces committed to ensuring that they wouldn't claw back that money from social assistance payments. So, women that are living in poverty, having extra money, sometimes, thousands of dollars in their pockets to be able to provide for their children in a more comprehensive way. A Canada Child Framework, so working with provinces and territories, significant contributions of money to make sure that they have a plan and an approach to increase the availability and quality of child care across the country. These are all substantial investments in the prosperity of women. And when I was Minister of Status of Women, that was something that I was very focused on, and I know my colleague Minister Monsef is as well. And in fact, I think the Prime Minister and entire government is that we can't talk about gender equality if we're not talking about the economic equality of women, and that when women have equal opportunities to succeed in the workplace, and when they have equal opportunities to earn money and in equitable ways as men, that's when we actually start to see the economy thrive.
But what if in 5 years women are still earning 20 cents less than on the dollar that every man is? How will we measure whether your government's efforts have actually produced change?
Well, the nice thing is we can measure that. We can measure that in rates of wages that are paid, and we have a number of data tools that we can use to ensure that we have the data that we need to assess whether or not our measures are making any tangible difference.
What happens if they're not, though?
Well, then we'll have to look at what we do differently. But what I would say is that we have to start somewhere. And what I'm profoundly proud of for this government is that we've put this at the centerpiece of not just in terms of our philosophy and our values, but in terms of our economy. We know that when women have every opportunity to succeed, that's when actually they can contribute to their full potential. They are spending money in the economy. They are building businesses. They are entrepreneurs, and we're supporting them. We're supporting them through just about every department of the government that has a responsibility for economic development, for example, skills training in my department. Many of the programs that we've redesigned have been thoughtfully designed to ensure that we're adding additional incentives for employers that are thinking about how they attract women to STEM fields, for example.
This legislation only applies to employers with more than 10 workers. What about MPs' offices, which typically only employ a few employees?
Well, we'll be working closely with the Board of Internal Economy to figure out how we do this for the House of Commons. But you do point out that this legislation does apply to all parliamentarian offices, to ministers' offices, including the Prime
regardless
Minister's
of the size? So every office will have to be, every MP's office, every minister's office will have to...
Correct. And we'll be looking at ways that we can ensure that we have some volume to be able to do that equity assessment.
So regardless of the size of those offices. Okay. Thank you, Minister. Appreciate your time, Mr. Hajdu.